Welcome to the Classic Soap Operas podcast. We are so thrilled you're joining us for another deep dive.
Hey there, great to be here.
And for this one, oh boy, we're tackling an absolute titan of daytime television, a show that's been, well, a cornerstone of American culture for decades, General Hospital.
That's right, GH. And we're able to really get into it today thanks to the fantastic sources you provided us with, these incredibly detailed Wikipedia pages. They cover the show's entire history, all the drama, the shifts, the evolution. It's quite a bit of information.
It really is. So we are plunging headfirst into the history of General Hospital, or, GH is pretty much any fan knows it. It's not just one of the longest-running soap operas in America.
Yep.
It's one of the longest-running scripted television programs in the world. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
It first premiered way back on April 1st, 1963.
1963. Just thinking about that kind of longevity is kind of mind-blowing, isn't it?
It really is.
And our mission today, using these sources as our guide, is to unpack exactly how it's managed to endure for so long. What were its foundational elements? How did it, radically change its approach over the years?
Yeah, and what were the wild, dramatic, sometimes even, let's be honest, outlandish storylines that kept viewers like you hooked, sometimes against all odds, for 60 years and counting?
Exactly, because this show has taken its viewers on some absolutely unbelievable rides.
It really has. So we're going to explore how those shifts shaped its history and its place in television. Get ready, folks. Let's unpack this incredible journey.
Okay, let's do it. Let's start at the very beginning, the early days. We're talking 1963 up through about, say, 1977.
Right.
General Hospital was created by the husband and wife writing team, Frank and Doris Hersley, and like you said, premiered on ABC April 1st, 1963.
And interestingly, it wasn't the hour-long format we're all used to today, was it? The sources point out it started as a half-hour serial.
That's right, just 30 minutes. It only expanded to 45 minutes much later in 1976, and then finally hit that full 1 hour length in 1978. So it took a while to get there.
And the setting itself was pretty focused initially, right?
Very focused. Primarily the 7th floor of, well, General Hospital. Simple enough.
Yeah.
And the city wasn't even named Port Charles until the late 1970s. That's a neat little detail. Shows you how much the initial emphasis was squarely on the hospital itself.
John Berardino, who played the iconic Dr. Steve Hardy for so long.
A legend.
He described the core concept back then like a big wagon wheel. The hospital was the hub, and all the characters were the spokes radiating out from it. It was really rooted in the medical world, the doctors, the nurses, their lives intertwining.
That's a fantastic way to visualize it. And speaking of those core characters, the sources really highlight Dr. Steve Hardy, played by Berardino, and Nurse Jessie Brewer, played by Emily McLaughlin, as the absolute foundation.
And they stayed for so long.
It's pretty astounding. Both actors remained with the show until they passed away, Berardino in 96 and McLaughlin in 91. That level of commitment, wow, it provides such an incredible sense of continuity for viewers over decades.
Absolutely. And they were joined about a year in by Rachel Ames as Nurse Audrey March. Her longevity is just as remarkable. She was still making advances up until 2015.
15, unbelievable. These characters really were the bedrock, weren't they?
Totally. So in those early years, what kind of drama were they dealing with? Was it more, grounded stuff?
It seems like it. The sources mention storylines like Jessie's really turbulent marriage to Dr. Phil Brewer.
Ah, Phil Brewer. Trouble.
Oh, yeah. And Audrey's relationship with Steve Hardy. There were other key nurses mentioned, too, like Meg Bentley, Diana Taylor, Sharon McGillis, and Jane Harlan. They all had their own connections and dramas.
Right, classic soap stuff, like Meg married Lee Baldwin and adopted Scotty.
Yep. And Diana was torn between Dr. Peter Taylor and that troublesome Phil Brewer again. Sharon married Dr. Henry Pinkham. Jane married Howie Dawson. Lots of complex entanglements, the lifeblood of early soaps.
But it wasn't all just relationship drama, right? The sources mentioned some more intense plots even back then.
Oh, definitely. There were moments that really made waves. In 1971, Audrey was accused of unaliving her own son's babysitter.
Wow, that's heavy.
It was. And that storyline actually gave GH a huge, although brief, boost in the ratings. Pushed it to #1, even beating The Giant as the world turns for a bit.
So even way back then, a big crime plot could really grab attention. That's interesting. They leaned into that kind of drama so early.
Maybe a sign of things to come, yeah. The sources detail more. In '72, Howie Dawson got involved with a woman named Brooke Clinton, who was then found unalived the day after she rejected him.
Yikes.
1973 saw Audrey marry Dr. Jim Hobart, only to realize, uh-oh, she still loves Steve. Classic soap triangle.
Always a good triangle.
And the drama around Dr. Phil Brewer just kept escalating. Augusta McLeod arrived in '73, brought Phil back into the picture, and get this, she was pregnant with Peter Taylor's child, trying to break up Peter and Diana.
Man, that Phil Brewer really caused some trouble.
He sure did. But the ultimate dramatic peak mentioned for this early period, December 1974. Phil Brewer himself is unalived
Oh.
with a geode paperweight.
Lefts? A geode paperweight.
Mm.
Seriously. Okay, the show's flair for the dramatically specific was definitely there from the start. That's quite an image.
Isn't it? Jessie Brewer actually went on trial for it, but she was acquitted. Augusta, the other woman, ended up going to prison and had to give her son up for adoption, so quite the fallout from the geode incident.
Wow.
But here's the thing. Despite these, bursts of high drama, the sources note that ratings were mostly stagnant through the '70s. The show is actually facing the very real threat of cancellation leading up to 1978.
Ah, okay, so this is the turning point. This brings us to the legendary Gloria Monty era, 1978 to 1987. This is when GH transformed from, like, a struggling serial into a legit cultural phenomenon.
Absolutely. Gloria Monty arrives as executive producer in 1978, and the stakes could not have been higher. The sources say ABC basically gave her 13 weeks. 13 weeks to boost ratings, or the show was gone.
Talk about pressure. 13 weeks.
No kidding. A real mandate.
And she obviously rose to the challenge. What was her secret sauce? According to the sources, how did she do it?
Well, Monty is credited with a few key things. First, she dramatically increased the pacing, made the show move much, much faster than traditional soaps. But her biggest innovation, the one the sources say GH was really the first among soaps to fully embrace, was introducing action-adventure storylines.
Action-adventure, like in a soap opera. Spies and explosions. And stuff like that.
Exactly. Spies, secret formulas, hidden treasures, even world domination plots. This was a radical departure from the usual domestic and medical dramas that defined the genre up till then.
World domination based out of Port Charles.
Okay, that's reaching peak soap opera absurdity right there. I love it. You gotta tell me about the Ice Princess storyline. It's practically legendary.
Oh, the Ice Princess, 1981. This was the plot of the era. It had Luke, Laura, and Robert Scorpio racing against the clock, battling the villainous Cassadine family, specifically Mikos Cassadine, who planned to freeze Port Charles solid using a weather machine.
Lots of weather machines, seriously. That's just gloriously over the top. You can't help but smile thinking about that playing out on daytime TV back then.
It's definitely memorable, and, it wasn't without controversy behind the scenes either.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the sources highlight that the head writer at the time, Pat Falcon-Smith, and her whole writing team actually quit over the Ice Princess plot. They reportedly called it convoluted, insipid, insane, crappy.
They walked out?
Yep. Left GH and went straight over to write for Days of Our Lives.
Yeah.
Falcon-Smith even had this famous quote describing Monty as a genius who runs a Gestapo operation. Whoa. Okay. So intense atmosphere, to say the least.
Give you a sense of it, right? Genius or tyrant, maybe a bit of both. But her methods, whatever you thought of them, clearly worked. Because this era is also defined by, well, arguably the most famous soap opera super couple of all time, Luke and Laura.
Oh, absolutely. Luke and Laura. Anthony Geary and Jeannie Francis. They were everything back then. Central GH rocketing to #1 in the ratings, a spot they held from '79 all the way to '88. Calling them a monumentally popular super couple isn't an exaggeration at all.
Not in the slightest.
And the numbers prove it. The sources mention their wedding in 1981. It wasn't just a TV event, it was a national event. 30 million people tuned in.
30 million. Let that sink in.
It remains the highest rated hour in American soap opera history. 30 million people watching a fictional wedding.
Think about that scale, especially now in our fragmented media world. It's almost unimaginable. It just shows the unique power and reach network TV and soaps had at that specific cultural moment.
Totally. It highlights their cultural impact. The sources even have this fantastic quote from Time magazine in '81 describing their popularity. It says, "Useless to resist, it is everywhere. On T-shirts, umbrellas, potholders, even nightgowns. It is a campus craze, a teenage fad."
That captures it perfectly, doesn't it? They transcended the show. They were just everywhere.
Their popularity was insane. During the summer of '81, right when the Ice Princess plot was unfolding alongside their romance, the show was averaging an astonishing 14 million viewers per episode.
14 million. Just wow.
So this first Gloria Monty era was GH's absolute peak of dominance. Highest rated American soap from 1979-80 until 1988, when it tied with The Young and the Restless. And the focus also shifted during this time, right? Setting up future stories by highlighting the Spencer and Quartermaine families.
Yes, exactly. Establishing those dynamic, often warring families provided such fertile ground for drama for decades to come. Gloria Monti's initial hugely successful run ended in 1987. That marked the end of this peak era and led into a period of transition.
Which brings us neatly to the transitional and social issues era, roughly 1988 through the year 2000. This was a time of navigating change, and interestingly, Monty actually came back for a bit, didn't she?
She did. She returned in 1991, but her second go-around wasn't quite a repeat of her earlier triumph. She was fired late that same year.
Really? Why? What went wrong the second time?
Well, the sources offer a few reasons. She failed to recapture that #1 spot the show had slipped down to #7. She was criticized for focusing too much on the male characters, which apparently alienated the show's core female audience. And there was this perception that she was using GH as sort of a launch pad for a new series she was developing.
Ah, okay. So the magic didn't quite strike twice, and maybe some of those same criticisms about her intensity resurfaced.
It seems that way.
Wow.
And adding to the challenges of that period, Anthony Geary returned in '91, which you'd think would be great,
Right, Luke's back.
but not as Luke Spencer initially. He came back as Luke's look-alike cousin, Bill Eckert, and that was reportedly not well received by fans at all.
Oh, yeah. That can be tough. Bringing back a beloved actor is one thing, but having them play a totally different character, risky. Sometimes it just doesn't land with the audience, does it?
It's definitely a gamble. But then came another really significant figure, Wendy Riche, who took over as executive producer in 1992. And her era is described very differently in the sources terms like woman sense and a real focus on social relevance come up.
Okay, so a shift away from the action-adventure focus of Monty, more towards, like, real-world issues.
Exactly. Under Rich's leadership, the show gained significant critical acclaim, especially for how sensitively and thoughtfully it handled social issues. They actually won their 3rd Daytime Emmy for Outstanding Drama Series in 1995, which is a huge testament to the quality of the storytelling during her time.
That sounds like a period where the show really recentered itself, maybe found a new kind of depth using its platform responsibly. What were some of the standout social issue storylines from the Wendy Riche's era?
Well, one of the most significant and enduring innovations was the Nurses' Ball.
Ah, the Nurses' Ball, yes.
Started in 1994, it became this annual in-show event, serving as a fundraiser, but also, really crucially, raising awareness for HIV/AIDS, both on the show and in real life. The character Lucy Coe, played by Lynn Herring, spearheaded it within the story.
That's incredibly powerful, especially back then. The sources include a really moving quote from Lynn Herring reflecting on that time. Compassion was about all we had to offer, but it was sometimes in short supply.
Wow, yeah.
The ball featured things like the Names Project AIDS memorial quilt, and it even coincided with a Day of Compassion across other ABC soaps. It really highlights how soaps could use their huge reach for public health messaging when understanding and treatment for HIV/AIDS was still developing.
It was a remarkable use of the platform, truly. And beyond the Nurses' Ball, there were other really poignant storylines tackling tough subjects. In 1994, there was this heart transplantation story.
Oh, right. That was BJ's story.
Yeah, following the tragic death of 8-year-old BJ Jones, daughter of longtime characters Dr. Tony Jones and Bobby Spencer in a bus crash, her heart was donated to her dying cousin, Maxie Jones.
Dealing with the death of a child, organ donation. I mean, those are incredibly heavy topics for daytime television.
Absolutely. And later that same year, Monica Quartermaine bravely battled breast cancer. That storyline really resonated with viewers, and it also led to her adopting Emily Quartermaine, the daughter of a friend she met during treatment.
So connecting personal struggle with building family.
Exactly. And perhaps the most widely acclaimed social issue story of this entire era was the Stone Kates and Robin Scorpio AIDS storyline in the mid-90s.
Oh, yeah. That story really captured the public consciousness, didn't it? I remember that being huge.
It absolutely did. It was praised for its raw, honest portrayal of a tragic love story between two teenagers. Stone, played by Michael Sutton, tragically died from AIDS at just 19 in 1995.
So young.
And the story followed Robin, played by Kimberly McCullough, as she grappled with being HIV positive because of their relationship. The actors got significant recognition. Sutton got an Emmy nomination, and McCullough won an Emmy for her incredibly powerful performance.
And this story had ripple effects beyond just GH. The sources mentioned an ABC after-school special, Positive, a journey into AIDS, and even a novel, Robin's Diary, that spun off from it.
It clearly struck a deep chord. And the sources give some fascinating behind-the-scenes insight, too, about the creative process and network dynamics. Apparently, Wendy Reach had initially considered using A.J. Quartermain for the storyline.
Really, AJ?
Yeah, but the network reportedly disapproved. They were worried that using a character from such a prominent family like the Quartermains might draw unwanted attention or potentially sidetrack the message with concerns about homosexuality, even though that wasn't the story Rish wanted to tell. Her goal was squarely focused on responsible sex and showing that HIV/AIDS didn't discriminate.
Wow, that's a really telling glimpse into the pressures showrunners face, isn't it? Trying to balance important social messaging with network sensitivities and perceptions. It highlights the challenges of tackling controversial topics on such a mainstream platform.
It certainly does. And speaking of challenges, this era also saw some rating struggles compared to those peak Monty years.
Yeah, the sources mentioned declining ratings in the mid-90s, down to about 10% just between January and May of 95. And real-world events didn't help either, like the O.J. Simpson trial preemptions in the summer of 94 constantly disrupting the schedule. That
Yeah.
never helps a serialized show.
Definitely not. And there was criticism, too. Time magazine notably scrutinized the show for using what they called morbid, publicity-conscious social relevance plots, suggesting maybe these heavy stories were driving some viewers away.
So a debate about whether the focus on social issues was actually helping or maybe hurting viewership at that point. Sources even mentioned Wendy Ritchie apparently regretted announcing the HIV storyline ahead of time, worrying it might have caused some people to tune out before seeing the full story unfold.
It's such a difficult tightrope to walk, isn't it? Wanting to educate and raise awareness, but also needing to keep eyeballs on the screen in a competitive landscape. However, there was also a positive view, highlighted by Marla Hart of the Chicago Tribune in '95. She saw GH as kind of saving the genre by returning to emotional wallop and real drama rather than just focusing on the hunk and babe ratings game.
Ah, okay. So while maybe controversial for some, others saw it as a return to meaningful storytelling. It was definitely a period where the show was evolving its identity again, and this era also saw the show revisit a very, very difficult and sensitive moment from its own past, involving Luke and Laura back in 1998.
Yes, the sources detail that storyline. It revolved around the revelation, or rather the confronting of Laura's grape by Luke years prior. This was revisiting a deeply traumatic event from the character's shared history.
That's incredibly sensitive ground to tread. How did the show handle such a dark topic?
Well, the sources highlight one specific, powerful moment where Anthony Geary, as Luke, delivered this intense 9-minute monologue to his son Lucky, with no commercial interruption, explaining the events of that night from his perspective.
9 minutes straight.
Wow. Yeah. And this storyline had profound consequences within the show's narrative. It drove a huge wedge between Lucky and Nicholas, and also between Lucky and Luke himself, leading Lucky to move out. It really fractured those relationships.
That sounds incredibly difficult to watch, but maybe also cathartic in a way, for the characters and longtime viewers who remembered the original event. The sources note this storyline got significant recognition, winning multiple daytime Emmys for the actors, the writers, the directors, and the show itself.
That suggests that despite the incredibly sensitive subject matter, the execution, the performances, the writing, it was recognized by the industry as powerful and well handled. It indicates the show was willing to go to those difficult places, and that when done with care, even revisiting past trauma could be dramatically resonant and critically acclaimed.
As this era drew to a close, a new supercouple started to emerge, one that would become absolutely central to the show for the following decades.
Ah, yes. The dawn of Sonny and Carly. Sonny Corinthos, played by the fantastic Maurice Benard, was introduced back in 1993. He was initially paired with Brenda, played by Vanessa Marcil, and they became this wildly popular pairing, achieved that super couple status purely based on their fiery chemistry.
Right, Sonny and Brenda were huge, but after Brenda left, Sonny went through various other relationships, right? Love triangles involving Lily Rivera, Miguel Morez, Jasper Jacks, but none seemed to quite stick or reach that same super couple level initially.
Exactly. That all changed when he was finally paired with Carly Benson. Carly, who was first played by Sarah Brown, then later Tamara Braun, and now Laura Wright, arrived in 1996 with a very clear, dramatic goal to make her birth mother, Bobby Spencer's life absolutely miserable.
So she wasn't even introduced with the idea of being Sonny's next big love interest.
Apparently not. According to writer Patrick Mulcahy in the sources, they actually weren't sure initially where Carly's character was even going, but the chemistry between Sarah Brown and Maurice Benard was just undeniable. By the turn of the century, their dynamic had propelled Sonny and Carly, or Carson, to their own incredibly enduring super couple status.
It's always fascinating how some of the most powerful pairings happen almost organically, just based on actor chemistry and how storylines evolve rather than some strict initial plan. That takes us through the social issues era and sets the stage for the next major phase.
Which brings us to the new millennium and what the sources often call the mob era, roughly spanning from 2001 to 2011. And this period saw another significant shift in leadership at the top.
Right. Wendy Ritchie left in 2001, reportedly fired, and was replaced by Jill Farron Phelps. And the early months under Phelps and head writer Megan McTavish were described in the sources as having a pretty dark tone and got some negative reactions from viewers initially.
That's what the sources indicate, yeah. And the world outside the show profoundly impacted the storytelling right at the start of this era, too. The sources mention that after the events of 9/11, ABC executives specifically ordered less violence and warfare in their programming across the board,
Ah,
which led to significant rewrites and even abandoned plot lines on GH.
that's such a stark example of how real-world tragedy directly influences fictional narratives, especially in a constantly producing show like a soap.
Absolutely. There was this planned big plot culmination for the long-running Spencer Cassadine feud called Endgame. It involved Helena reviving Stavros Cassadine using cryogenics classic Cassadine stuff and a major biotoxin threat. But the biotoxin element was quickly dropped due to sensitivity after 9/11.
Wow. So the turn of the show really seemed to shift in this period, leaning much more heavily into organized crime storylines.
Yes, this era became particularly known for, well, pretty violent storylines, often centered around the mob. The sources even include a quote referring to it as basically Sopranos in the daytime.
Chuckles. Okay, Sopranos in the daytime.
And this focus seems to have coincided with the ratings dropping down to number 4 during this time.
What were some other significant storylines or events from this mob era?
Well, besides the altered endgame plot, Luke and Laura actually divorced in 2001. That was a huge shift for the show's most iconic pairing.
Yeah, end of an era, truly.
And sadly, the nurses' ball, which had been so important, was briefly disrupted by a bus accident storyline in 2001, and that actually led to the annual event being discontinued for quite a while.
Oh, that's such a shame, especially after seeing how impactful it was in the previous era for its social messaging and community feel.
It really was a loss for the show's identity at the time, but GH did continue to celebrate its incredible history. On April 17th, 2002, they aired their 10,000th episode.
10,000. Incredible.
And it very fittingly focused on Rachel Ames as Audrey March Hardy, celebrating her character's 10,000th shift at the hospital, and it featured lots of great clips from the show's extensive history. Milestone episodes like that are so important, aren't they, for acknowledging the legacy and connecting with longtime viewers like you?
Absolutely, a great way to honor the past. What about some of the big dramatic sweeps events? Soaps love those.
Oh, they definitely had them. February 2004 saw the massive Port Charles hotel fire. This was a huge event location shoot, helicopter, the works. Trapped many characters, led to high drama like Edward Quartermain having a heart attack, Courtney Matthews rescuing someone for a reward, and Scott Baldwin being presumed unalived.
A huge hotel fire is definitely classic soap opera territory. And there was a serial killer plot mentioned too.
Yes, in the summer of 2004, a masked serial killer terrorized the Quartermain mansion during sweeps. The sources suggest this plot might have been an attempt to lure viewers from NBC, as Days of Our Lives had a similar storyline running at the time.
Ah, the old counter-programming strategy.
Exactly. The killer was eventually revealed as Mary Bishop, who was targeting Emily Quartermain but accidentally unalived Sage Alcazar instead, which then led to Lorenzo Alcazar seeking revenge by switching Mary's medication. It was quite a tangled web.
It sounds like they were really pulling out all the stops with dramatic plots to compete. This era also saw a lot of cast changes and recasts for key roles, didn't it?
That's correct. The sources note pretty frequent recasts, especially for a major character like Carly, who went from Tamara Braun to Jennifer Bransford, and then finally to Laura Wright, who still plays her. Felicia Jones was recast, Maxie Jones was recast, and also aged up significantly. Recasts are often just necessary for a show running this long, but they can be really challenging for audiences who get attached to a specific actor in a role.
Yeah, it takes some getting used to sometimes. And despite all these intense storylines, the ratings continued to face challenges during this period.
Yes, viewership was down significantly. The sources note it was down 23% year over year in February 2005. This period saw budget cuts and the introduction of product placement advertising within the show, reflecting the economic pressures daytime soaps were facing.
But even during this darker mob era, the show didn't completely abandon tackling social issues, did it?
No, thankfully, they continued to weave in relevant themes. In the summer of 2006, for example, there was a storyline involving Lulu Spencer dealing with an unplanned pregnancy and ultimately choosing abortion. The show actually worked with the national campaign to prevent teen pregnancy on this.
Oh, interesting.
And the sources indicate that this particular storyline saw ratings rise among female teenagers.
So even in a period maybe defined more by action, addressing real-world issues could still resonate, especially with younger viewers.
It shows the multifaceted nature of the show's appeal, definitely. Robin's HIV-positive status and the theme of responsible sex were also revisited in her relationship with Dr. Patrick Drake. Patrick even had his own HIV scare after getting cut during surgery on an AIDS patient, and that story won a Sentinel for Health Award in 2007. Nancy Lee Grant's storyline as Alexis Davis battling lung cancer also received recognition around that time.
So the legacy of addressing health and social issues definitely continued, even if the dominant tone might have shifted towards the mob stuff.
Exactly. And this era was absolutely packed with high-stakes sweeps events. There was a major train wreck in November 2005 that was actually the first big story for Laura Wright when she took over as Carly.
Trial by fire, a train wreck for the new Carly.
Pretty much. Then, in February 2006, the entire General Hospital was quarantined due to an encephalitis virus outbreak. This storyline led to the tragic unaliving of longtime characters Tony Jones and Courtney Matthews, but it also served as a way to bring back fan favorites like Robert Scorpio and Anna Devane.
Using a big crisis to bring back legacy characters and create high drama. That's a classic soap move. And Jeannie Francis returned as Laura again around then too, didn't she?
Yes, in November 2006 for Sweeps. It was a hugely emotional return. She briefly awoke from her catatonic state, remarried Luke on their 25th anniversary, a big nod to the past, and then tragically slipped back into catatonia. Jeannie Francis won her first Supporting Actress Emmy for that powerful return arc.
Oh, wow. That must have been such an emotional roller coaster for viewers who'd been invested in Luke and Laura for literally decades. And then there was a really unique high-stakes event in February 2007, something about a hotel.
Ah, yes. The Metro Court Hotel hostage storyline. This was a significant event, reportedly told in a 24-style format, taking place more or less in real time over 16 episodes.
16 episodes, wow.
Yeah. James Craig and masked gunmen invaded the hotel, held a ton of characters hostage, forced them into these deadly games. Robin was shot. Emily and Carly had to perform impromptu surgery. Alan Quartermain suffered a heart attack during the crisis.
So much happening.
Craig eventually escaped, but sadly, Alan Quartermain later died from complications related to the heart attack. Although, in true soap fashion, Stuart Damon, who played Alan, returned later in a recurring role as Tracy Quartermain's conscience.
Laughs. Returning as someone's conscience after you've been unalived.
Yeah.
That is peak soap opera. It sounds incredibly intense, though, and a great example of the show experimenting with format.
Definitely. But despite these big events and the lingering social issue threads, the show's reputation for mob violence remained pretty strong throughout this era.
Still The Sopranos in the daytime.
Pretty much, yeah. By 2008, that element was still very present. There was a big storyline involving Sonny's son, Michael Corinthos, then played by Dylan Cash. He bought a gun, accidentally shot Sonny's girlfriend, Kate Howard, and then later, Michael himself was shot by a hitman named Ian Devlin with a bullet actually intended for Sonny. It was a plot orchestrated by Claudia Zaccara.
Wow, consequences hitting the younger generation hard.
Yeah, and the sources quote the head writer at the time, Robert Guzza Jr., saying he specifically wanted to show the consequences of Michael's actions with the gun. The storyline resulted in Michael falling into a permanent coma, and the young actor, Dylan Cash, was let go.
Showing consequences, even for main characters' children, definitely adds a layer of reality, even within the heightened mob world. This period also saw a lot of turnover in the head writing department, didn't it?
Oh, yeah. The sources list a whole bunch of head writers during this time. Michelle Valjean, Elizabeth Corte, Megan McTavish came back, Robert Guzza Jr., Charles Pratt Jr., Garen Wolfe. Ron Carlivati started near the end. It highlights frequent changes, especially compared to Wendy Rich's long tenure before. Frequent writing changes can definitely impact a show's creative direction and overall consistency.
Absolutely. Any other specific, really memorable storylines from the later part of this mob era that the sources highlight?
The Lisa Niles storyline is mentioned as a particularly dramatic peak. This character, Lisa, snuck onto Matt Hunter's boat, unalived the first mate, stranded the boat out at sea, pushed Elizabeth Weber overboard,
Oh, gosh.
and then drugged and tied up Patrick and Robin, attempting to inject Patrick with Robin's HIV-positive blood.
Yikes. That sounds absolutely terrifying, like a horror movie plot.
Pretty much. And when Lisa was later found unalived, everyone who had been on that boat became a suspect. A classic, high-stakes soap whodunit.
Intense. And then there was the incredibly difficult Franco storyline involving Sam and Jason.
Yes, the sources detailed this storyline, which occurred horrifically on Jason and Sam's honeymoon. Franco, who was played by James Franco initially in a guest arc,
Right. James Franco was on GH.
he locked Jason in a room and made him watch as he went after Sam, leading them both to believe that he had raped her.
That is just a horrific premise.
Yeah.
An incredibly difficult storyline to portray
Yeah.
and very dark territory for the show to explore. These plots from this era definitely seem to have pushed boundaries.
They certainly did. This period really reflects a show grappling with its identity, trying different things, leaning hard into action and mob drama to capture ratings, while still occasionally addressing social issues, all amidst leadership changes and these intense, sometimes really controversial storylines.
Which brings us to the most recent era covered in the sources, remodeling and resurgence, starting around 2012 and going up to the present. And this era began, surprise, surprise, with another major leadership change.
Exactly. Frank Valentini, who had been the executive producer of One Life to Live, and Ron Carlivati, who was the head writer for OLTL, took over from Jill Farren Phelps and Garen Wolfe in January 2012. And Valentini described his approach not as rebuilding the show, but as remodeling it.
Remodeling, I like that analogy. It implies keeping the foundational structure, but, updating and improving it, maybe a new coat of paint. What did that involve?
His focus, according to the sources, was on increasing the pace even further, making it really fast, and crucially bringing back key archetypes, popular legacy characters, and fan favorites to kind of re-energize the show.
And this period also saw the show attempt something really unique, didn't it? Integrating characters from other canceled ABC soaps.
Yes, this was largely born out of circumstance. ABC had canceled both All My Children and One Life to Live, replacing them with lifestyle shows. So General Hospital, as the last ABC soap standing, integrated some OLTL characters after that show ended.
Okay, so what was the initial plan for bringing those characters over?
The initial plan, as detailed in the sources, was pretty dramatic. They were going to bring over Cole Thornhart, Star Manning, played by Kristen Alderson, and their baby Hope Manning Thornhart from OLTL. They'd arrive in Port Charles only to be involved in a car crash with Anthony Zacchara that would tragically unalive Cole and baby Hope.
Oh my God, right off the bat.
Yeah, dark stuff. This tragic event would then bring Star's parents, Blair Kramer, Cassie DePaiva, and Todd Manning, Roger Howarth, to town. Todd would buy the local newspaper and TV station. John McBain, Michael Easton, would arrive investigating Sonny for the crash death, and Star would eventually be paired romantically with Michael Corinthos.
That sounds like a huge dramatic crossover event, really weaving them into the fabric of GH. Yeah. But there was a legal issue, right? A roadblock.
Yes, a big one. A company called Prospect Park had acquired the rights to revive AMC and OLTL online. They sued ABC over the use of the OLTL characters on General Hospital.
Oh, wow. So what happened?
This lawsuit forced GH to make a really unusual pivot. Kristen Alderson, Roger Howarth, and Michael Easton, the actors who had come over playing Star, Todd, and John, had to stop playing those characters and start playing completely different, new characters created for GH because Prospect Park owned the rights to the OLTL characters.
Wait, seriously? They had to keep the popular actors but give them entirely new names, backstories, everything. That must have been incredibly confusing for the audience initially.
Wait, isn't that Todd Manning? Why is he calling himself Franco? Chuckles. It was a fascinating, pretty unprecedented situation in daytime history. So Kristen Alderson became Kiki Jerome, who became Morgan Corinthos' girlfriend. Roger Howarth took over the role of Franco, who, as we mentioned, had previously been played by James Franco, and Michael Easton became Dr. Silas Clay, revealed to be the twin brother of a previous character, Stephen Clegg.
Wow.
The show basically had to launch entirely new storylines, the resurrection of the Jerome crime family, Franco having a brain tumor, the Silas and Sam relationship, just to integrate these same actors in their brand new roles.
That's quite a creative challenge, basically turning a legal lemon into storyline lemonade. But despite, or maybe even because of, these dramatic shifts and character reintroductions, the show started to find its footing again under the new team.
It really did seem to. Right away in January 2012, Sam learned she was pregnant with either Jason or Franco's child. Jason then killed Franco in James Franco's final appearance. And then Sam later discovered Jason and Franco were actually twins, and Franco was allegedly the baby's father, just layers upon layers of classic soap complexity right from the start.
Never simple.
And also, in February 2012 sweeps, Robin Scorpio Drake was seemingly unalived in a lab explosion. This was because Kimberly McCullough had decided to leave the show to pursue directing.
Oh no, not Robin again. That poor character can't catch a break.
Hmm.
But you mentioned Ron Carlivati, the new writer, wanted to bring hope back. Did that apply to Robin's fate?
Absolutely. That was one of Carlivati's first big moves. He quickly revealed that Robin was actually alive and being held captive somewhere. He explicitly stated in the sources that he wanted to bring a sense of hope back to the audience, especially since other soaps were going off the air and many fans felt, disenfranchised. He didn't want to start his run by unaliving a legacy character.
That's a really powerful intention behind the writing. It shows an awareness of the audience's mood after a tough period of cancellations for the genre.
Definitely. During this time, Maxie Jones also falsely confessed to Lisa Niles' unaliving out of guilt over Robin's supposed death and actually went to jail for it before Matt Hunter was revealed as the real unaliver. And in a truly wild storyline that intertwined with the OLTL crossover chaos, Sam gave birth while stranded in the woods.
Of course she did.
Lass.
On the same day as Taya Delgado from OLTL. Taya's baby was tragically stillborn, and in a classic, almost unbelievable soap twist, her healthy baby was switched with Sam's by Heather Weber and Todd Manning. Taya left town with the healthy child, thinking it was hers, and Todd later learned Jason was the true father of the child Sam lost track of, but kept the secret under blackmail.
Switched babies and crossover characters involved in the switch. Okay, they were definitely amping up the classic soap dramas.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
It absolutely was pure, high-octane soap, and despite the wild plots, or maybe even because of them, something was clearly working. General Hospital was renewed for another year in April 2012, and that summer they were even invited to the prestigious Television Critics Association press conference, which is a real sign of industry recognition for the show's turnaround.
And the ratings started to reflect this resurgence, right?
They did. By the end of 2012, ratings had climbed back up to over 3 million viewers, which was the highest they'd been in 2 years. And crucially, the key demographic of women, 18-34, saw a significant rise, up 44% year over year.
44%. That's a huge jump. MSN Money even cited General Hospital as leading a potential soap opera revival, stating pretty definitively the show got a lot better.
High praise. And TV Guide named GH the best soap of 2012. They praised Valentini and Carlivati specifically for successfully amping up the action, the humor, the romance, and really energizing the cast by bringing back past stars and creatively integrating those OLTL actors, even in their new roles. The whole remodeling approach seemed to be exactly what the show needed at that moment.
It sounds like it. This era also saw the very welcomed return of Jeannie Francis as Laura Spencer in January 2013, this time for an extended run and a major milestone celebration for the show.
Yes, the 50th anniversary on April 1st, 2013 was a huge event for the show and its fans. They celebrated by bringing back a whole host of popular characters and revisiting storylines that evoke the show's past hallmarks, like having Luke and Laura confront Helena Cassadine again.
Classic matchup.
And, very importantly, they revived the Nurses' Ball.
Yes. Thank goodness the Nurses' Ball came back. The sources quote Frank Valentini saying, "I love music and I love nurses," and really emphasizing that feel-good philanthropic aspect that he felt the show needed to get back to. And Lynn Herring returned as Lucy Coe to help get it going again, bringing back that community spirit and social awareness element.
Its return was widely celebrated by fans, and it has remained a popular annual tradition ever since.
That's great to hear. What were some other notable storylines around 2013, 2014 that kind of illustrate the show's direction in this resurgence era?
Well, there was a dramatic multi-car crash on New Year's Eve 2013 involving several characters: Connie, Johnny, Michael, Christina, Starr, Trey, Ellie Trout. It had big consequences. Trey became brain dead and was tragically taken off life support by Christina and Connie, and Ellie Trout was temporarily paralyzed. Classic multi-character disaster trope.
Right, spreads the drama around.
Maxie Jones also miscarried the baby she was carrying for Dante and Lulu, but then later got pregnant with Spinelli's child. She kept the paternity a secret because Spinelli was in a relationship with Ellie Trout at the time. Baby drama galore.
Always reliable soap fuel. And there's a storyline that paid homage to the Port Charles spinoff, even involving vampires. Or something like vampires.
Yes, this was wild. In February 2013 sweeps, in a moment of glorious soap absurdity, Lucy Coe ran into John McBain, remember, played by Michael Easton, who had previously played Caleb Morley, a vampire king on the Port Charles spinoff.
Right, the vampire connection.
So Lucy became convinced that John McBain was Caleb Morley, the vampire, and that she was a vampire slayer. She actually stabbed him with a wooden stake and got sent to the Ferncliff Asylum, insisting she was a slayer.
Laughs. That's amazing. Referencing the spinoff and embracing that level of, metafictional campiness is just brilliant fan service.
It was definitely a deliberate homage, acknowledging the actor's history and the spin-off's later, more supernatural direction. Valentini and Carlavati clarified they weren't actually bringing vampires into GH proper, but the story was meant to be an over-the-top yet rooted in reality homage. They describe Lucy as just being off-kilter, but certainly not in Heather Weber territory.
Okay, a crucial distinction.
And later, it was revealed that this Caleb figure was actually a different character entirely from John McBain, just happened to look like him.
Balancing that wink to the audience with maintaining the show's core reality must be a tricky line to walk. And other Port Charles characters showed up too, creating more crossover feel.
Yes, Allison Barrington arrived with her son, Rafe Kovich Jr., both characters from Port Charles. John McBain was later arrested for Allison's unaliving, adding more layers to his story. Also, A.J. Quartermain, played by Sean Kanan, made a dramatic return to town after his brother Jason was presumed unalive. So lots of returns and connections being explored.
Really drawing on its rich history and its spin-off universe to create new drama.
It was. This era also introduced some compelling new characters, like Mina Clay. She arrived in early 2014, initially revealed as Silas Clay's wife, who had been in a coma for years. There was suspicion around Silas maybe causing the overdose that put her there, but the twist was even darker. It was revealed Nina's own mother, Madeline Reeves, had intentionally overdosed Mina years prior, trying to get rid of Nina's unborn baby, because Nina was pregnant with Silas's child at the time. And then Madeline declared Nina legally dead to get her hands on her inheritance.
A mother trying to unalive her pregnant daughter for money. Wow. That is some deeply twisted family drama, even by soap standards.
It certainly is, and the drama just escalated when Nina miraculously awakened after nearly 20 years in that coma in May 2014. She arrived in Port Charles the following month, making this incredibly dramatic entrance at a birthday party for Danny Morgan, who was the son of Silas's new girlfriend, Sam. Just shocked everyone.
Imagine waking up after 20 years and finding your whole life completely changed. Your husband's moved on, he has a kid with someone else.
Exactly. And the big twist was Nina wasn't as okay, or maybe as unaware as she initially let on. She had actually been awake longer than she admitted, had secretly trashed Silas's apartment months earlier, and was secretly plotting revenge against everyone who had wronged her while she was helpless. Dramatic character returns with hidden agendas. That's classic soap opera fuel. And Nina's arrival definitely delivered.
Definitely sounds like it. And another significant new character, Jordan Ashford, arrived in March 2014, immediately getting embroiled in drama when she learned her son, TJ, was caught up in a mob war between Sonny Corinthos and Julian Jerome.
Jordan's story added layers of complexity right away. She took a job working at Julian Jerome's art gallery, despite warnings from TJ's guardian, Sean Butler. Sean even threatened to expose Jordan's past prison time for dealing drugs to try and keep her away from the dangerous Jeromes.
But then she secretly agreed to distribute drugs for Julian. That seems totally contradictory if she's trying to protect her son.
But that's where the great twist came in. Jordan was eventually arrested in a big sting operation, only to reveal she wasn't actually helping Julian at all. She was an undercover DEA agent working to bring down the entire Jerome organization from the inside.
Ooh, very clever. Undercover plots are always exciting. It adds a fantastic layer of complexity and explains her seemingly risky choices.
Exactly. The show also marked its 51st anniversary on April 1st, 2014, continuing that tradition of celebrating these milestones.
And this era wasn't afraid to tackle incredibly sad and sensitive subjects either, like the storyline involving baby Gabriel Drake Santiago.
No, they definitely went there. Gabriel was born prematurely after a car accident in April 2014 to parents Patrick Drake and Sabrina Santiago. He suffered a terrible setback and was tragically diagnosed with necrotizing enterocolitis and massive organ failure. He was baptized and, just heartbreakingly unalive, surrounded by his parents.
Oh, wow. Dealing with infant loss is incredibly difficult territory for any show, let alone a daily soap opera. It really shows a commitment to portraying the full spectrum of human tragedy and grief, even the most painful parts.
It speaks to the show's continued willingness, even in this resurgence era, to go to dark and emotional places to tell impactful stories.
The sources also highlight that leadership changes at the head writer level have continued in more recent years, particularly after 2019. It seems like the revolving door keeps spinning.
Yes, it seems so. Shelley Altman retired in July 2019, and Dan O'Connor and Chris Van Etten took over as co-head writers. However, there was another big change in January 2024 when Van Etten and O'Connor were dismissed and replaced by Patrick Mulcahy and Elizabeth Corte.
Well,
But then just a few months later, Patrick Mulcahy was dismissed in May 2024, and Chris Van Etten actually resumed the co-head writer role, this time alongside Kathy Lepard as an associate head writer, starting in August 2024.
Wow, that's a lot of change at the top in a very short amount of time. It really underscores the dynamic and sometimes turbulent nature of production on a long-running series like this. One decision can really alter the path.
It absolutely does. And each change in leadership can, and often does, significantly impact the show's creative direction and the specific stories being told.
We should probably also touch on some key production details that highlight the show's amazing history and scale. General Hospital has always been filmed in Hollywood, right? Started at Sunset Gower Studios, then moved to the Prospect Studios in the 80s, where it still is today.
That's right. And its ownership has evolved too, from Selmer Productions initially, then ABC bought it outright, then Capital Cities ABC took over, and since 1996 it's been owned by the Walt Disney Company. It also marked a technical milestone as the first ABC soap to broadcast in high definition back in 2009.
And like pretty much all shows, real-world events can impact production, even for a long-running machine like a soap opera.
Definitely. The COVID-19 pandemic in March 2020 obviously suspended production, but they were able to resume filming by July and get new episodes back on the air by August 3, 2020. The sources actually note that General Hospital was Disney's first scripted series to go back into production during the pandemic.
Wow, that's incredible resilience, a testament to the dedication of that huge cast and crew finding ways to keep the stories coming safely.
Absolutely. And all of this history, all these changes, challenges, and stories contribute to its status as the longest-running American soap opera currently airing, and, as you said, one of the world's longest-running scripted shows, period. It aired over 15,000 episodes as of May 22, 2022.
15,000. Just try to wrap your head around that number. And you mentioned the sources talk about the cast photo for the 60th anniversary in 2023.
Yeah, just the sheer number of people in that photo, actors, crew, producers, it's a visual representation of the massive operation this show is and the vast universe of characters it encompasses. Laughs. It's a lot of people.
Laughs, I bet. Beyond the main show itself, GH exists in a larger fictional universe and has launched its own spin-offs over the years.
Yes, it famously shares a fictional universe with other classic ABC soaps like One Life to Live, All My Children, Ryan's Hope, and Loving. They're all theoretically located within commuting distance of New York City, allowing for those crossovers we talked about.
And the actual spin-offs.
Well, there was The Young Marrieds, which was conceived as a sister soap back in the 60s, but it only ran for 2 years before being canceled due to low ratings.
Okay.
More notably, there was Port Charles, which aired from 1997 to 2003. It started as a more traditional daytime spinoff, focusing on interns and hospital action, and featured established GH characters like Scott Baldwin, Serena Baldwin, Lucy Coe, Kevin Collins, Karen Wexler.
Right, I remember that starting out focused on the hospital, but Port Charles famously took a very different turn over time, didn't it? Got kind of weird.
Chuckles. It did. It underwent some significant changes. It evolved to include gothic intrigue and eventually full-blown supernatural elements, vampires, the afterlife, that kind of stuff in its later years.
Vampires. Laughs.
Yeah.
So Lucy, thinking John McBain was a vampire, wasn't completely out of left field, given the spin-off's history.
Exactly. It also experimented with its format, switching to self-contained 13-week story arcs they called books, much like telenovelas. It was a really unique and bold experiment with the daytime genre, trying different things to survive.
Fascinating. And there was another one more recently, Night Shift.
Yes, General Hospital.
Okay, Night Shift.
That was a primetime spin-off that aired on the SoapNet cable channel from 2007 to 2008. It followed the, nighttime adventures of various characters at the hospital. It was reportedly SoapNet's most-watched series ever and drew a significant number of new viewers to the channel.
So the show has experimented successfully with bridging that gap between daytime and primetime audiences as well, finding viewers in different time slots.
It found an audience with Night Shift, yeah. Showed there was interest in the world of Port Charles beyond its traditional daytime slot.
And the settings within Port Charles itself, the hospital, the hotel, the diner, they almost feel like characters too, with their own histories and dramatic arcs.
Oh, absolutely. Port Charles, New York is the fictional home base, obviously. General Hospital itself, founded way back by Dr. Steve Hardy, is the central hub. It's a major employer, the sprawling medical facility. It's been rebuilt after fires, had wings donated by wealthy characters like Sonny Corinthos for AIDS research and Carly Corinthos for pediatric neurology. It's so much more than just a backdrop. It's where so much of the core drama begins and often ends.
And the Metro Court Hotel seems like the go-to spot for high society drama, betrayals, and maybe the occasional hostage situation.
Chuckles, definitely. Built by Jasper Jacks on the site of the old Port Charles Hotel after it burned down, and named in honor of Courtney Matthews. Carly Corinthos has been a key figure in its ownership saga, currently co-owning it with Olivia Falconeri. It's the place for elegant parties, dramatic confrontations in the fancy restaurant or spa, and housing high-profile residents in its penthouses. Lots of intrigue happens there.
And then you have the more grounded, everyday heart of the town, Kelly's Diner.
Kelly's Diner. That vintage restaurant founded way back by Joe Patty Kelly, it's often considered the real heart of Port Charles. It had those upstairs boarding rooms where characters lived. It's been passed down through families notably left by the beloved Ruby Anderson to her niece and nephew, Bobby and Luke Spencer, upon her death. It represents that stable community core amidst all the mob wars and medical crises.
And the Haunted Star Yacht always sounded like something straight out of one of those action-adventure plots.
It kind of was. Given to Luke Spencer as a wedding present way back in '81. Over the years, it was turned into a casino, then later a nightclub run by his daughter Lulu. Definitely a place for parties, secret meetings, and general intrigue. Sadly, the sources note it was destroyed in 2023.
Another iconic location gone. And the Floating Rib Bar. That sounds like a classic hangout.
Yeah, originally called Jake's, the Floating Rib was a popular downtown bar conveniently near the hospital, a hotspot since the early 90s. Owned over the years by characters like Corman Ratcliffe and later Max Scorpio. Interestingly, it also existed as a fine dining restaurant way back in the late 70s, early 80s. But tragically, like the Haunted Star, it met a dramatic end destroyed by a bomb in 2020, which unalived multiple patrons inside.
Wow. It's true. Locations and soaps can have their own dramatic fates, sometimes just as tragic as the characters. All of this incredible history, the radical plot changes, the enduring characters, the social commentary, the wild spin-offs, the iconic settings getting blown up, it all contributes to this show's incredible, sometimes baffling but undeniable legacy.
It truly does. And looking at the sheer number of awards the show has won over the decades really reinforces that legacy across all these different eras we've talked about.
Yeah, General Hospital has won numerous Daytime Emmy Awards for Outstanding Drama Series, which is, the top prize for the show itself.
Yeah.
The sources list the years 1981, 82, 83, 84, just dominating during that Luke and Laura Gloria Monty super couple era.
High at the peak.
Then again in 1995 during the Wendy Riches social relevance era, 2000, then 2004, 2005, 2006, during that mob era, 2011, 2013 during the Valentina Carlovati resurgence, and then a really notable run of wins more recently in 2016, 2017, 2022, and 2023. Winning in so many different decades under different producers with totally different tones shows a consistent level of quality recognized by the industry, doesn't it?
It really does. And they've also won multiple Emmys for their directing and writing teams over the years, highlighting the talent working behind the camera as well, and being included on Time Magazine's prestigious 100 Best TV Shows of All Time list, not just once back in 2007, but again in 2023 for the updated list. That's a huge testament to its cultural significance and impact beyond just the soap genre bubble.
Absolutely. So bringing it back to the listener, to you who wanted to dive into this show's incredible history, why does a show like General Hospital, with this wild, constantly adapting, sometimes chaotic history, resonate so deeply and for so incredibly long? What can we take away from this amazing journey through Port Charles?
I think for me, the key takeaway is its almost unparalleled ability to adapt. It hasn't been afraid to just dramatically shift its focus, starting as a medical drama, then pivoting hard into spy adventures, then tackling really sensitive social issues head on, then leaning into gritty mob stories, and then consciously remodeling itself by bringing back legacy characters and even integrating new ones from shows that got canceled. It's constantly reinvented itself, sometimes successfully, sometimes maybe with a few bumps along the road, but always in pursuit of staying relevant and dramatic.
That adaptability is clearly crucial for survival and the long-haul television game. And despite all those genre shifts, the constant thread seems to be the enduring power of family sagas and deeply invested character-driven drama. Whether it's those core families like the Hardys way back when, or the Spencers, the Quartermains, the Corinthos family, the Jerome's, viewers like you get incredibly invested in these generations of interconnected lives, their loves, their losses, their endless conflicts and reconciliations.
Absolutely. Those long-running characters, often played by the same iconic actors for decades, provide that consistent emotional anchor. They allow viewers to follow these complex, evolving journeys over years, even decades. It creates this unique shared history between the show and its audience.
Thinking about everything we've covered just now, The geode unaliving, weather machines, freezing cities at the vital nurses' balls, international spy plots, monumentally famous super couples, switched babies, maybe vampires in Ferncliff, hotel fires and hostage crises, undercover agents, tragic infant loss, constant recastings and writing changes. It's just an unbelievable tapestry of television history rolled into one show. What stands out to you most from this deep dive into Port Charles?
For me, it's the sheer creative bravery, or maybe sometimes creative madness, required to produce a show that has literally done all of that and still remains on the air today, still winning Emmys, still engaging fans after 60-plus years. They've thrown everything at the wall: medical ethics, international espionage, deep social commentary, gritty crime, campy humor, heartbreaking tragic romance, and somehow that core of character and relationship drama manages to hold it all together more often than not. It's kind of a masterclass in narrative endurance through constant, sometimes radical evolution.
It really is something else, and that incredible, sometimes mind-bending ability to adapt leads us right into a final provocative thought for you, our listener, as we wrap up.
Okay, lay it on me.
Given General Hospital's incredibly long history of adapting its format and focus, from that grounded hospital drama to action-adventure to sensitive social issues to mob stories, even incorporating supernatural elements in its spin-off and playfully nodding to vampires in the main show, what does this remarkable history of constant reinvention tell us about the fundamental nature of storytelling itself and about audience expectations in a really long-running series? And maybe, just maybe, what might be the next wild frontier for a show that feels like it's already done almost everything imaginable?
Wow. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Its history suggests that maybe, for these truly long-running serials, audiences might actually be more open to radical tonal and genre shifts than we sometimes give them credit for, as long as those underlying character relationships and the familiar world of Port Charles itself remain compelling and recognizable. What's next? Space aliens visiting the hospital. A full-on musical season. Given GH's track record, truly anything feels possible at this point. Laughs.
Laughs. You might be right. And honestly, that unpredictability is probably part of the fun of following a show with this kind of history. Never a dull moment right here.
Well, that was a truly fascinating, sometimes absolutely wild, and ultimately really impressive ride through the decades-long history of Port Charles and General Hospital. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive, and a huge thank you to you, our listener, for providing the fascinating and detailed sources that made it possible for us to explore this incredible show.
It was a real pleasure. Diving into the evolution of General Hospital like this, it really does provide a unique perspective on the history and the enduring appeal of the entire soap opera genre.
If you enjoyed this deep dive into the history of General Hospital, please be sure to like, subscribe, and leave us a comment. Let us know what classic soap opera or even another long-running series with a rich history we should dive into next. We absolutely love getting your suggestions and exploring the shows that you're interested in. Thanks for listening.